Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to episode number 8 of the DeVaney Music Podcast. I'm your host, Ian DeVaney, and today I have alternative rock artist Chase Tremaine, who I believe is from Dallas, Texas, but is currently living near Nashville. What town did you say you just moved to recently?
Yeah, I usually say from Dallas, living in Nashville. But I'm actually from Arlington, Texas, born in Fort Worth, Texas, and just moved to a small town outside of Nashville called Smyrna.
Okay. Well, you just made all the people from those smaller towns happy just because you mentioned those names.
Right.
So there you go.
Yeah, us Arlington people are always used to being called Dallas over the news, or Dallas Fort Worth if we're lucky.
Is it like a suburb or like an actual town or?
Well, that's the thing. Arlington is actually massive. It has the college I went to in my hometown has 50,000 students. It is the home of the Texas Rangers baseball team, the Dallas Cowboys football team, as well as Six Flags Over Texas, the amusement park. So it's one of those like anomalies as to why it's not a well-known city, but c'est la vie. I won't lose any sleep over it.
Oh, well, that's interesting. Well, and your latest album is titled Development and Compromise, and that came out this last year. And was it the fall of this last year, or was it earlier than that?
Well, it came out twice,
okay.
Which we may or may not talk about, depending on where the conversation goes. But I released an 11-song version of the album in January, then took that version offline and released a 15-song version of the album in November.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
And had you also reworked some of the songs you already recorded, or was it just kind
of... That is correct.
Okay.
So along with recording 4 new songs, reworked to varying levels, 10 of the original 11 songs had either something re-recorded or something new added, and then the entire project was remixed and remastered.
Okay, cool. Well, maybe I'll ask you a couple more questions about that just because that's
Sure.
interesting. So
yeah.
So what, I mean, obviously you had some more material that you had written, but what led to being inspired to go back and re-record that much music?
So I'm kind of viewing my first 3 albums, the third one not existing yet, as the phase of my career where I'm releasing all of my favorite songs that I wrote over the past decade or so, basically throughout the 2010s. That I was seasonally prolific at different times of life. And once I started writing and recording solo music, I decided that I wanted to put more and more of that music out into the world while I focus on writing brand new music, which will become my focus in the next year or two. So Development and Compromise started out as a B-sides project to Unfall. It was the songs that I had considered at some point before Unfall, before I had a really good idea of what the style and theme of that album was. But through that, the Development and Compromise, as I first made it, did not have the luxury of being sonically unified or thematically unified. And so when I released it the first time, it was kind of a rushed project of kind of straightforward B-sides that I didn't put very much thought or intention or to. I just wanted to record the songs and put them out into the world. But the crazy part of the process was that rather than paying a producer to record 6 songs or 12 songs, I just paid a producer for a week and said, let's record as much music as we can in this week. And I figured that if I was lucky, we would finish 6 songs. But to my amazement, we recorded 11 songs. So that kind of put me in a conundrum of like, do I want to release this as my sophomore album, or am I going to keep this as the B-sides that I originally intended it as? And I was even thinking of it in terms of the band May, how they released Destination Beautiful as their debut album, and then immediately followed that up with Destination B-sides. So in my mind, that's what I was doing. But I just loved the songs so much that I kind of changed my original plan and decided to just release it as a standalone sophomore album instead. And later in the year, after the album had already been out for 5 or 6 months, I was just looking back upon it and thought, it's like, if I love the song so much, why didn't I give them more time, more care, more thought? And so, along with the desire to go back into the studio to really just kind of pour some more love into them, and to use information and experience I gathered to just kind of bolster the music of the songs. I picked up through other studio experiences in early 2021, was just like learning more about how to make songs sound good and how to best like layer guitars and things like that that I wanted to apply to those songs. And I wanted to invite friends to come and sing on them and play on them as well, and make it more of a collaborative thing. And then as I looked back on this catalog of songs that I have from like the past decade or so, I realized that there were a few songs that were just itching to be on this project. So that includes the opener, a song called Saturday AM. It includes later in the album, the heaviest song I've ever done, called Interrogate the Fantasy. And 2 others that for me really helped make the album thematically and sonically cohesive in a way that it wasn't before. And in my mind, at least, brings it up more to the cohesion and quality that my debut album had.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and
so I didn't big info dump. So thanks for sitting there through that monologue.
Yeah, no problem. And I didn't even realize that you had a debut album until I was just reading your little press bio thing. Somehow that slipped under my radar, so I'll have to listen to that later. But so yeah, you are new to me as a musician, and I know that you reached out to me a while ago. In fact, we kind of just talked a lot about your album up front. I was going to mention a couple other things about you. I think I connected with you probably in a Jesus Freak Hideout forum or Indie Vision Music forum.
Yeah,
that's my guess. One of those two. And you're a writer for Jesus Freak Hideout, correct? Yep. And you're also host of the Unlearning Ignorance podcast, which I think you haven't done an episode in a while, but do you think you're going to pick that up again, or?
Yes. So we might be releasing a new episode any day now. My co-host and I have found it perpetually difficult to make time for that podcast because it's very research intensive podcast. That then usually includes a lot of editing on the back end. Because what it is every month, or really what it was when we were regularly releasing content in 2020, is that every month would be a new divisive issue, and we would kind of dig into and research opposing opinions on whatever that divisive issue was, and then bring those to the table in order to not only practice amicable conversation with differing opinions, but also to display the act of representing viewpoints that you don't agree with well, because we see that as being a major blind spot for a lot of people in our culture, that a lot of people argue against, whatever Democratic or Republican or Libertarian argument or socialist argument that you don't agree with. Talking about these issues, or even things in art, debating about Star Wars or Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
And not like arguing with a very narrow idea of what the other human being that you're arguing with actually believes.
Mm-hmm.
And people, and you throw around the word straw man a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very serious issue when you have this, if you think the viewpoint on the other side of the table is so ridiculously wrong that you don't even understand how anyone could believe it, then you're basically dehumanizing that person
Mm-hmm.
and failing to empathize with why a fellow human being would disagree with you.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the backbone of the podcast, is us doing the work and trying to represent to our listeners and encourage them to do the work as well, of representing your dissenters and opponents well,
Mm-hmm.
to actually be knowledgeable about the things you disagree with before entering into the public sphere with
Mm-hmm.
those disagreements.
Yeah.
So for various reasons, the podcast didn't release any episodes in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
He had his first child. I got married. I got busier with music. His work schedule is usually awful. So we're hoping we can get things consistent again for 2022, because we really do believe in the idea of the podcast. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that would be really cool. I'm guessing you probably won't find any shortage of divisive issues that you could probably cover and discuss at this point
Right.
in time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we have a very long list of working issues, and the longer that the world remains the way it is, the more topics come up.
Yeah, I mean, you could be like the most popular podcast ever then, if people would actually listen to something like that. You'll never run out of material. So
Right.
That's interesting though. I asked you about that because I saw that and the concept was interesting. And I know during COVID, especially when things were really locked down, something I started doing was really seeking out podcasts that did that. I would try to seek out podcasts that or shows or things that put people with totally different views together,
Yeah.
And I know it's amusing to me that because people feel very strongly about this person, but I listened to Joe Rogan quite a bit just because I was fascinated, because 1 week he would have Ben Shapiro on and the next week he would have Bernie Sanders on, and then the following week he'd have Tony Hawk on. So, just all these totally different and interesting people, frequently with opposite ideas, but he, wasn't afraid to just sit and interview them and have an open dialogue, which
right.
I think is why it's the most popular podcast in the United States right now, and I think people frequently get upset because he'll have someone on who they think is basically unworthy, because they're so wrong that we can't even listen to them,
Yeah.
But it's well, maybe we need to listen to them so we can understand better. But,
yeah. Right. And there's I think a growing epidemic that is being exacerbated by the social media platforms that we use, where effectively it's the echo chamber problem.
Mm-hmm.
But it's that whether it's YouTube or Twitter or Facebook, these websites, are trained to give you what you like, basically. Mm-hmm. So you have algorithms that are learning you, so that it can just feed you things you already agree with, things they are pretty sure you want to hear, videos that you want to watch. And through that kind of support system of I'm right, you're wrong, I've noticed from the biggest issues down to the smallest issues, people become convinced that all logical, sane people agree with you, and that the people who disagree with you are fringe nutheads.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you look at the past few like presidential elections, it's amazing how like split down the middle it is. Like it's the popular vote is so close in these past few elections of like 50%, that, you know, if you think that the person that you disagree with so vehemently is just insane, you're talking about half of the population. You know, you're talking about half of the people in your neighborhood, half the people in your apartment complex, half the people shopping around you in Kroger. And I just don't think that's a healthy way to live and a healthy way to view your fellow humans, especially in the context of, you know, trying to build a better society. And quite frankly, we're not building a better society. You know, things are like falling apart at the seams right now.
Yeah. Well, and I had this thought earlier when you were talking about the person who they legitimately think the person who disagrees with them is crazy, basically, you know, and they couldn't understand how anyone could remotely hold that view or ideology. And a thought that I had that I think I've never framed that way before is that by actually having that attitude, you might be demonstrating yourself to be basically the less intelligent person, or at least the less understanding person, you know, because I mean, I feel like that is a mark of certainly understanding, if not intelligence, is being able to grasp like multiple perspectives of something, even if you disagree. So if you can't do that, you know, I mean, and legitimately that there are some crazy things out there, but certainly not everyone, and probably not even most people who disagree with you most of the time are legitimately crazy, you know?
Yeah.
So
right.
Yeah.
Like there's no way that 50% of Americans are clinically insane.
Yeah.
Or like morally demented. You know, we like, why do, like, let's give people the benefit of the doubt and try to understand, like, why do you believe what you believe? You know, not only to, and it's that like the two sides to it. Like, one, to make sure that you accurately understand what you think the other person believes, and then to get down to the deeper side of it of like, why do you think that way?
Yeah.
You know, what is the reason behind it? Like, what is the like primal thing that you're trying to protect through, you know, the belief that you have, or even like the tastes that you have.
Yeah.
You know, it goes really deep. And like, I mean, you know, we're talking about very serious issues, you know, with a lot of this, but on the less serious side, my Twitter account has effectively become a stan account for The Last Jedi, the episode 8 of the Star Wars series.
Yeah.
And it's very fun for me. Like, and I say that because my Twitter account only gets attention when I'm tweeting about The Last Jedi. Whenever I try to like talk about music and promote my own like music or podcasts, you know, like I will get 5 or fewer likes. But then tweet about The Last Jedi and probably, you know, dozens, if not hundreds of likes. And through that, you know, it's like you see this trend of people who like thoroughly believe that fans of a movie are in the minority, that fans of the movie are crazy or idiots or hate the franchise. And then like you can try to have logical discussions with someone of like fairly talking about viewpoints and try to like fairly make arguments. And it's crazy how quickly people can just dip into ad hominem arguments where they're no longer actually talking about the point you're making, and they just start making accusations against you as a person. And suddenly it's no longer about the topic, it's about your character as a human being. And that's a very, very common thing. And it's quite frankly, it's very sad. You know, when you're separated enough from it, you know, like you're on Twitter, you know, you're talking to a stranger who might as well be on the other side of the planet. It's humorous, but the same thing happens with friends. The same thing happens with family. And that's where it loses its ironic comedic edge and just becomes desperately sad.
Yeah, I legitimately have like longtime friends or family members who have unfollowed me or whatever, you know, because, or won't talk to me because they actually misunderstand something that I posted or thought about something.
Oh, sure.
You know, it's not even that they they understand what I believe and disagree with it. It's like they completely like don't grasp like something that I said, and then they're like, oh well, you're stupid, I'm not talking to you anymore, you know. And I mean, I feel like that's happened way more in the last year or two than ever before. Like, something I've always tried to do in my life is to foster friendships and relationships and maintain relationships with people who do disagree with me on things. And it could be about faith or politics or whatever, but I almost value those relationships more because I feel like they're more rare. And I think we all need those people in our lives who just disagree with us, who we can have an open conversation with.
Right. And that kind of like validates the friendship.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like this person actually cares about your relationship if they're willing to disagree with you about things that are important to either or both of you. Yeah. And yet still work on it.
Mm-hmm.
I was very thankful for the eventual outcome of a kind of a similar situation last June. Well, I guess last June of 2020, when it was like Blackout Tuesday,
mm-hmm.
When everyone was encouraged to just post a black image on their social media accounts in honor of George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, like this was all related to the not just a social movement, not just a hashtag, but an actual organization called Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made a post about like, you can agree with the phrase, you can agree with the sentiment, Black Lives Matter, the idea of African-American lives have intrinsic value without mm-hmm. supporting the official organization known mm-hmm. as Black Lives Matter. And like almost lost friends over that. And, you know, I was very thankful that like one friend in particular moved the conversation from comments into direct messages and that we were able to kind of hash it out. And like, mm-hmm. It came to an utter disagreement, like, you know, that he was a very big BLM proper supporter.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just like thankful that like me pointing out something that I see as being very obviously true mm-hmm. didn't destroy friendship, but you know, like it came close. And like that's kind of the era we're in, especially when, you know, not only is nuance becoming rare, but none of these platforms that we use for communication are very good at nuance. Podcasts honestly might be one of the best places for nuance, just because it allows for long form conversation, and that, I mean, so many podcasts are long form mm-hmm. at this point, and that's helpful.
I saw an article recently that kind of stated something along the lines of that podcasts were maybe actually combating basically illiteracy in the United States.
Oh, wow.
Or at least ignorance and unawareness, because people, I mean, they may or may not read a great deal. I mean, hopefully they do. I do, but not everyone does. And I feel like most people just look at TikTok or Twitter and they get their 60-second things, and it's very difficult to hold anyone's attention for anything. But then, you know, people will listen to podcasts that are a half hour, an hour, or even 3 hours long. And these long debates or conversations or lectures, and frequently they're about philosophy or religion or about things in society. And it's intriguing that that's kind of become the public square, mm-hmm. I guess. So and
it's primed and ready for social distancing.
Perfect. But anyway, it's interesting because like one of the goals of my podcast is always it's to talk about people's music, but I mean, one of the things I'm very interested in, or almost more interested in, is finding out like what it is that people are passionate about besides music, or what they do in their time. Because like, I mean, for one, that's not always something that people know. And I think it also tends to add a certain depth, like behind someone's music, or just getting to have valuable conversations, because I mean, we'll talk a bit about music here, but you can only talk so long about like choosing the right bass tone, or like, oh, like this artist sounds like this artist or whatever, but
Yeah.
then like, it's like, okay, so what else can we talk about, or what is there that like inspires you to create art or in life in general? So yeah, we got a little bit of that, at least on the front end of this podcast.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah, speaking of which, you also are a seminary student. So
I
I'm guessing
was.
you
Yeah.
were. Okay. Are you finished or taking a break, or?
I don't know if I'll ever go back. And that's kind of a multifaceted issue.
Yeah.
Every time I think that my life has like a clear path ahead of me, something happens that sends it totally off.
Yeah.
So like out of college, I was looking at getting a biblical counseling degree from Dallas Theological Seminary, and got a job down the street from Dallas Theological Seminary. So it looked like God was just aligning the stars, right, for me to move to Dallas, to actually live in Dallas, as we talked about earlier, and work the job and go to the night classes, and like it seemed so perfect. But I was working on a contractual position, and like after fulfilling 2 contracts, they didn't need me anymore. And like found out a few years later that the entire department that I was in would get laid off in those few years to come. So there was like really no chance that I could have had a long-term career there.
Oh, wow.
And then just a month or two after losing that job, I totaled my car and decided to just kind of live off of that money for a little bit rather than buying a new car. So that ruined all plans for Dallas Theological Seminary, and then for Dallas anything, because a little bit after that, my brother and I, schemed to move to Nashville together. So I moved to Nashville, again, like semi-directionless, still trying to figure things out. And, assumed I was moving there mostly for songwriting reasons, but just was not able to get my foot in the door anywhere. Was trying to have lots of co-writes with people that almost uniformly went terribly. And even a lot of people that I was writing with are people that like stopped doing music in like the years to follow. So it was just like so many of those things like not working out. And then in 2017, found the church that I am still a member at now, 5 years later. So in my first year or two at the church, was just getting more and more involved, and there were some people who were kind of investing in me in terms of my kind of love for teaching and such. And during that time, just was so involved there that I wasn't really pursuing music much. I was writing songs on occasion, but that was the end of it. So I just came to a point where it seemed like a now or never type occasion to go to seminary. And there was a good deal for going through Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, where they had a kind of a, what's the word I'm looking for, a hybrid situation of online / in-person courses through a church they partnered with in Nashville. So I had the opportunity to do, learning online kind of at my own pace, mix it in with my in my full-time work schedule, and then just spend like 2 weekends per semester in just intensive, like all day in-person courses. And on a lot of levels, I loved it and was doing really well, was getting good grades, was learning a lot. But I found that it was actually really bad for my spiritual life and my spiritual health. That I kind of thrived on the intellectualism side of theology, and found that becoming really like smart and impressive and like getting the good grades was replacing actually like caring and actually loving and following the Lord. And so when that clicked for me, I was like, probably shouldn't do this anymore. And in hindsight, it makes sense because I wasn't going for a particular reason. I was getting the most general of master's degrees, kind of just to have it and just to have that kind of extra training and experience, which, you know, I would have learned a lot, but it wouldn't have been too much more than I just already was learning for fun through the books I read and podcasts I listen to and whatever else. And like, I wasn't going for counseling specifically. I've never felt a calling to be a pastor specifically. And as far as counseling goes, you know, the longer we live in modern society, the more, you know, it's moving in a direction of Christian counseling being some version of illegal. So, you know, I'm not sure how much I'd want to get into Christian counseling as my bread and butter career anyway. So left seminary, and when I kind of got that no from the Lord for seminary is when I also felt him giving me a yes for music and kind of opening that door again. So I started becoming like very involved in the local Nashville music scene and just trying to support more local artists, go to more local concerts, you know, not just going like seeing the big bands that I like when they tour through town, but really like the smaller venues, the up-and-coming artists. And through my own years of loving music and writing music, I thought it would be fun as I get more involved with the scene to at least have a few songs out there under my name where I could say, hey, this is what I do. Here's what I'm competent in. At least a few songs that would say, here's me as a lyricist, here's me as a singer, here's me as a guitarist, drummer, bassist. You get an idea of all of this to kind of one, say like, hey, like I'm a legitimate musician, and two, say like, no, hey, if you need like a fill-in bassist or drummer for your concert, or if you want someone new to write with, or someone to help record guitars for you in the studio, that I would be like able to do all those things, and here's the proof. So that was kind of the idea that like the original idea of me recording a few songs was just to be to better be part of the scene and as just some extra way to get connected. So I recorded 3 songs with a guy named Zach Lardy, who at the time was signed to Tooth and Nail Records under the project Empty Isles, which he's still releasing music as Empty Isles, but I do believe his relationship with Tooth and Nail has ended at this point. But that's how I found him. I found him through a Tooth and Nail newsletter and really liked his stuff and thought it was like it would be fitting for what I was going for and what I wanted to do. So made 3 songs with him. And as I sat on it and figured out how I was going to release it and showed it to other people, I had friends kind of affirming me in that, like, you know, these 3 songs are great, but they don't seem like it's a finished thing yet. And, you know, like I've always been an album person. Like I have a massive CD collection. I almost exclusively listen to music in the form of full albums. Like I very rarely listen to playlists or singles. I don't skip tracks. Like I listen to albums front to end, and that is basically the entirety of my music consumption. So it just seemed right to like give myself the chance to make a full album. And so made a deal with Zach to come back to the studio and to record 7 additional songs to add on to the original 3 that would make my debut album Unfall. And kind of just wanted to put my best foot forward and make like one album that I could be super proud of without being sure whether I would ever make music again. So like if I'm only going to make one album, I want this to be like the album. And so that's what I did. And I made something that I'm really proud of and released it. And then COVID happened. So all of my plans to like get more involved in the scene and go to shows and support other artists and do co-writes and all that was kind of just dead in the water.
Yeah.
So alongside the pandemic, thought, I guess I'll keep this recording thing going.
Okay. Well, I wanted to,
yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I wanted to ask you about that, but also just as a tangent question, like you talked about how you have loads of CDs, which I do too. I probably have 500 or 600 CDs and a vinyl collection. I even have some tapes. Don't have any 8-tracks. Sorry, 8-track fans, and I listen to Spotify a lot, but I'm curious then, and you listen mostly to full albums. So do you listen mostly to CDs then?
I listened almost exclusively to CDs from like junior high up through 2017 or 18. I was very anti-streaming service for a very long time. And quite frankly, I still kind of am. But it got to a point in my time writing for Jesus Freak Hideout that it just was not sustainable to not have access to a streaming service. Because it got to the point where like a lot of artists weren't sending us
physical CDs.
Like physical CDs, they weren't sending us digital previews very often. So a lot of like reviewing and checking out music was happening when stuff actually released online. And I wasn't going to go out of my way to buy all of it. I was still like buying a lot. I had a record store in town that I basically went to every Friday and usually would leave like with at least 1 to 2 CDs. So I made the switch. Technically it wasn't Spotify. I did Amazon Music for a little while. Now I use Spotify. So recently I don't buy as much music as I used to. And if I do, it's more often a vinyl record than a CD. But yeah, my CD collection is still pretty vast. I think at this point, like I go ahead and still use the streaming service, even if I own the CD. One, to keep the CD in better shape, and two, because it's just a little bit of extra money and like stats for the artist. I've also over the past year got into using Last FM to track all of my music listening, which has helped a lot with like blogging and other efforts I have on the side. And it's just fun. Like my wife and I are always really excited to check out, like every week we pull like a 5x5 graphic that shows us like our top 25 like most listened to albums of the week. So there's fun things like that are really fun that are made possible through using things like Spotify. But I mean, I think streaming is a pretty broken business model. I'm kind of in the same way that there was like the internet bubble bust in like the 2000s and like the housing bubble bust in 2008. Like I'm kind of waiting for the streaming bubble to burst at some point. Maybe it won't happen. But I've brainstormed like my own ideas of how I would change the payment models for streaming. But it's not like anyone's ever going to come to me for that.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I kind of asked because, I think I maybe mentioned this. I probably have 500 or 600 CDs. And then I have a vinyl collection, which I think I trimmed it down. So I probably only have 50 records, maybe a few more than that now. I used to have.
Yeah, honestly, like your description is super spot on. Like hundreds of CDs, probably less than 100 vinyl records, and then just a few tapes. So you and I are like completely like eye to eye on that.
And at this point, most of my CDs are in boxes. I mean, I've got a couple of my favorites maybe, or that float around, and I'll pop into my stereo or my truck. But like otherwise, streaming has become the main way that I listen to music, at least when I'm on the go. Otherwise, if it's one of my favorite albums that I have on vinyl, or a new one that they really want and happen to buy, then I'll listen on my record player at home. But even though I have hundreds of CDs, I don't listen to them much anymore. But it's interesting. I was trying to buy some music for a friend recently, which is another weird dynamic, trying to like gift people music in the digital age. And CDs would still seem like the most practical way to do that to me if you're trying to, because not everyone has a record player. Most people have a way to play a CD. They can put it on their computer or whatever,
Right.
So I looked up a couple artists that, they're not like massive per se, but they're pretty well-known popular artists. Like I tried to get a Liz Weiss CD, and if you don't know who Liz Weiss is, she's really like probably the coolest gospel artist there is out there now. So
yeah, I actually got to see her play live, opening for Propaganda once.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, I'd love to see her live. I haven't seen her. I have seen Propaganda though, and he's very good.
They're both great.
Yeah, but I tried to get her CD, and at least her first album, it's just not, you can't get it. I mean, I think initially she put it out on CD and you can buy one for like upwards of $35 on eBay or something, but
Jeez.
But it's funny because you can actually buy her vinyl record for 18 then. So
man.
The CDs are more money than the vinyl, which is hilarious to me. But then I thought, oh, well, I'll try John Foreman. I love John Foreman. You can't go wrong with him. So I tried to get his latest live album, the Melody League one, on CD, and he just never released it on CD. And I think he maybe even has one or two other albums that aren't on CD. And finally, probably my favorite artist I've discovered in this last year is Madison Cunningham.
Oh yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah. So I managed to get her, not her latest album, but her main release, I guess, on CD to give to my friend. But after that, I posted about it, and then I looked up an article that a friend shared with me, and it was talking about CDs. And apparently, I can't remember exactly, but I think CD sales declined by like 97% or something like that in the last 20 years. And I think even more so in the last year, not more than that, but more sharply.
Well, the 2021 was the first year where CD sales increased over the past like 20 or so years.
Interesting.
Like 90s, obviously, you had even smaller artists, relatively speaking, could have a platinum selling album.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are platinum selling albums from the 90s that would shock you. Whereas nowadays, people are getting platinum certified because of streaming, which I hate. But because like where's the meaningful metrics anymore? Like, can't we just keep categories separate? But that's a different rant. So we did see a 1% increase. Obviously, that 1% isn't much, but it's still an increase.
It doesn't make up a
little bit of hope.
Doesn't make up for like 97% decline, but
right.
But so the thing that was really interesting to me was that CDs had declined by that much over the last 20 years. They kind of peaked around 2000, but vinyl in just this last year increased by like 94%. Which is massive,
crazy.
And it's interesting to me too, because I know there's been kind of a shortage of vinyl printing available. And I know some market people, I'm a music business guy. That's what I got my degree in. So, so some market people were like, oh, well, vinyl is going to die out now because we can't keep up with demand. But it's just increased. So that was bizarre to me, but I don't know.
It is interesting to see the market hit this point where vinyl plants simply cannot keep up with demand, though, because it's affecting so many things. It's angry customers who are getting late shipments, angry customers who are getting vinyl records with flaws because the factories are being forced to make things so quickly and probably not checking every single master for every single variant or whatever the situation is. And then albums getting delayed so that there's time to make vinyl records beforehand, even though like you almost don't even have a guarantee. You might release the delayed album and still not have the vinyl records ready yet. So I do think the industry will see some negative effects from this. Like it's definitely I'm not expecting any big increase, if any increase at all, in vinyl sales for 2022, but it is going to stay up there.
Yeah.
What I'm hoping for is that the 1% increase in CDs means that maybe like we'll plateau.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not steadily increase, but I'm hoping we're hitting a point where like CD sales are like will continue at this rate, like where that we won't get lower than this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm expecting something similar to happen with vinyl records, especially if we don't see any massive increase of plants and employees.
Yeah.
For it, so that we'll hit kind of a high end.
Yeah.
Plateau, but we'll see. It's interesting to follow for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, if you're someone who just happens to have like $1 million lying around, probably starting a vinyl plant would be a pretty good business plan at this moment. But yeah, it's a pretty expensive game to get into. So
I believe it.
But yeah, and you started talking about this, but I thought it was interesting when I was looking at both of your albums that they were both released during COVID,
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, like, what was it like to basically try to start a music career during quarantine, which,
it stinks, man.
Yeah.
Did you have anything more to that question before I start complaining?
Before you start complaining? Well, I mean, I think probably both of us being involved in music in some way can see a lot of negative things. So I guess beyond that, is there any way that you think something positive has come out of it, or like not really,
I mean, this is only barely related, but I mean, the huge positive is that, my now wife, I dated long distance for a large part of quarantine, and you could basically blame COVID for the fact that we really got to know each other in the first place.
Uh-huh.
We had met at a Wolves Gate concert in 2019. She went to South Korea to teach English for a year, and I just had this very busy life of church involvement, going to concerts, releasing an album, that there was kind of like no putting brakes on it, except COVID put brakes on it. And so suddenly, like, all of her plans to travel Asia and be involved in a local church and get to explore Korea and such, those were all halted. And she basically was either at school or at her apartment. And then I was stuck at home and working my job remotely. So suddenly there was all this free time that allowed us to get to know each other better, to the point of eventually long distance dating and now being married. And so that relationship did end up consuming a lot of my time during quarantine, which I'm not complaining about at all. And she is my biggest and best fan. But the other elements of trying to get a music career off the ground under these circumstances was just very, very hard for me. Like, I'm not great at the online game.
Yeah.
I've consistently failed over and over again at Instagram, to the point where I just deleted my account. Like, I don't even have Instagram at the moment. I guess I disabled my account technically. But and I've gone off and on of Facebook over the years. As I mentioned earlier, Twitter is only good for me when I'm talking about The Last Jedi, which doesn't do much for my music career. And I don't want to be part of the next big social media platform. I don't want to be trying out a bunch of different things. I don't want to learn how to be good at TikTok or Periscope or whatever.
You don't want to be hooked up to the metaverse?
Yeah, correct. Which, hilariously, the metaverse is probably going to be one of our upcoming Unlearning Ignorance episodes.
Nice.
But the, as I said earlier, like, one of the big like ideals for creating music was to have something to share with the local community, to have CDs to give out for free at local concerts that I'm attending, to use it as kind of like a self promo to get into collaborating with other artists more, and kind of all that stopped. And I even as I mentioned, I play basically all the instruments on the CDs. So I didn't have a band. I didn't have anyone who knew how to play my music. And I was looking forward to that possibility of getting some friends together to play live concerts. And so that, couldn't happen either.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I don't mind playing my songs acoustically, but that's not what they're made for. It's not, my songs aren't acoustic singer-songwriter songs with, just other instruments put on top. I view like the guitar riffs and the drum beats and the harmonies as being very integral to my song compositions. So like, I don't like stripping my songs down to acoustic form. So I did the acoustic live stream thing a few times in early quarantine days, and it was fine. And it got decent responses, but still, it's like wasn't a thing I was a big fan of. And so just losing like the ability to connect with people in person, was tough. The whole game of like trying to just sell myself to people and send out all these emails trying to get people to like review my album or consider my song for a Spotify playlist. All of that is just like, it's okay, but it's also kind of soul sucking. And I also just like have somehow throughout quarantine still remained so busy that it's very hard to keep up with things like that. Like I had very big plans for my single I Don't that I released in October. It was the main lead single to the re-release of Development and Compromise. And I is one of the brand new songs that we recorded for the second version of it. And I was very, very excited for it. I thought it had a lot of potential as a single. And I had all these plans for different ways to promote it on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, write blog posts about it, push it to different playlisters, and basically just didn't have time for any of that. And just like got, like busy with work and, other plans, and all these responsibilities came up. And it's just, it's hard, especially like when you don't have a team behind you. You don't have bandmates to lean on. You don't have a manager to work with. Like my music career is me and me alone, aside from producers that I work with in studio. So, I'm very proud of like the small fan base that I've conjured up at this point. And, I have a few people who really like to believe in the music and love it. I think most importantly, like I like it. I enjoy my music. I'm glad that I'm putting this music out into the world. But yeah, it's a weird situation for sure. And it keeps me humbled as well, because if my music doesn't matter to my wife, my brother, my parents, my neighbors, my church community, then I don't really care, or at least I shouldn't care if it matters to, a bunch of strangers on the other side of the planet. Like I want the art that I create to first and foremost be community building here, like in the community where God's placed me. I want the people who are inspiring the music that I write to in turn be encouraged and edified and entertained by the music I write. Like I use those 3 E's a lot, very intentionally. Like those are what I want, like the goals of my music to be, like entertainment, edification, and encouragement. And so if that's not happening here locally, then, like why would it matter if I had 100 or 100 million monthly Spotify listeners?
I think that's definitely good outlook. I think like, a lot of times in my experience, friends and family maybe don't listen to people's music, like, or my music or podcast or like whatever. Like sometimes they do, sometimes they don't, but like a lot of times artists do find the most interest outside of that. So I think I was just going to say, I think that can be a thing. I would say, but whether that's true or not, at the very least, what you're doing musically or artistically shouldn't like create a negative effect on like the people who you're close to, which I think frequently is the case with musicians and the people they're dating or married to, or just their friends or family or church or whatever. So
like, I think if you take my kind of the ideas I just proposed, that mindset, as you said. I think the part of it that I would suggest for all artists is exactly what you just drilled down to,
Mm-hmm.
that you aren't making music at the expense of spouse, church, family, friends. Whether they actually listen to it and care about it is another thing.
Uh-huh.
And I'm definitely like the larger aspects of that mindset aren't something that I think all artists need to agree with or do. And I think there's something to be said for artists who specifically want a separation between like their community and their artistry,
Mm-hmm.
to say like, I'm this famous musician out there to millions of people, so I need my local inner group to just see me as Dan, or whatever, to just see me as regular human,
Mm-hmm.
not big superstar. And so there's absolutely a place for that as well. And I think there's also a big danger for artists of like not having a good or healthy overlap of fan and friend.
Yeah.
And when you try to treat your friends as fans or as potential fans, you can really muddy up, if not completely ruin,
Mm-hmm.
those friendships by commoditizing them.
Yep.
And every time you reach out to your friends, it's just about trying to have them stream your new single or buy tickets to your new concert. And
Mm-hmm.
it is not sustainable as a live artist. I know this from experience back in Texas, back when I was playing my brother's band. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Like if you make a big deal out of one show, you might be able to sell out a small venue
Mm-hmm.
by getting all your friends and family to come. But you cannot sustain a career by trying to get your friends and family to come to every single show. You shouldn't try. Like that is a big danger that I think a lot of smaller local indie bands fall into all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
like that's an important thing as well that I try to keep out of my mindset. For me, like my mindset comes as kind of like a two-pronged thing. One, it's the acknowledgement, like in my own heart and soul, that I know that I have cherished and idolized. Sorry, I just made a simple word more complicated.
That's okay.
Idolized the idea of fame and the desire to become famous throughout my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think fame, if I were to actually achieve it, would be extremely crippling and poisonous to me. So there's an aspect of me releasing music where like I try to be careful not to really chase after that, not to allow the idol to exist in me continually that desires that,
Mm-hmm.
and makes decisions to try to achieve that. And then the other prong of that thing is like wanting to culturally return to
The community.
a place. Yeah, well, yeah, a mindset where art is gift instead of commodity, basically.
Yeah.
Where it's not a trick if I'm giving you a CD for free.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, I just want you to have this and
Mm-hmm.
hope that it benefits you, hope you enjoy it. Where people can gather together and just hang out, and part of them hanging out is people passing around the guitar and playing songs for each other if they want to. It's having a culture where music isn't this thing where there's this money barrier between you and your enjoyment of it. And I think if you can remove that, then it becomes much easier for friends and family and neighbors and such to be involved, because you're not trying to get anything from
Mm-hmm.
them outside of maybe just like time. But again, if it's as personal as like, hey, I'm having a few friends in my living room, we're going to play some music, like that's a much different thing than having someone come to a concert where they're going to dress up and pay a parking ticket and or pay for parking spot. And so like, or even just to write songs for people. Like that's something I'm a big fan of. I haven't done it much in recent years, but I used to do it more frequently. Where it's like, hey, I wrote a song for you specifically, and I think that's a really like cool and powerful thing that songwriters are capable of doing. But instead we try to write songs for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I just had some friends come over and play music in my living room the other day, and that was a lot of fun. I mean, one of the reasons I started this podcast was basically because of COVID too, because I've done concert promotion for like 10 years, up until COVID, and then I couldn't anymore. And then sitting around, I had always thought in the back of my head, well, maybe I could start a podcast. And then I started thinking about it more. I had some friends tell me that I should. So I was like, this might be the best way for me to like share my love of music with other people at this point.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, to talk a little bit about your new album though, I mean, and we've talked quite a bit about it already, but I mean, it's gotten some great reviews out there, including some by people that I follow online. So that's cool. I also know, like you mentioned that you're a multi-instrumentalist, and obviously you're the main vocalist on the album. I was curious though, what else? Maybe you played on it, or who else did you have involved?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'll say that this will probably need to be the last question. I'm running up against a time
that's okay
commitment, but yeah, I've definitely been super pleased by the response to the album, and the 2.0 version, so to speak.
Yeah,
it ended up on some Juice Freak Hideout lists, Chorus.fm, formerly known as AbsolutePunk.net. One of their critics had it on their favorites of the year. Honorable mentions on the website UTR, maybe hopefully other places. But yeah, the feedback has been really great. And I know a lot of the favorite songs are ones that feature other people on it. So the original version of the album that was released back in January, I think with bad intentions, had very tight grip around this idea that I wanted to play every single note, sing every single note on the album.
Yeah.
So the 11th song version from January, if you heard samples or keys or anything like those were played or programmed by me, all the drums, guitars, bass, every single vocal and harmony, all me. And I think a lot was improved by bringing friends on and allowing other people to join in. And in some cases, like join in a way that was actually compositional as well, not just me playing what I told them to play, but then really, contributing their own creativity to it. So that includes my wife, who turned the closing track, The Things We Can't Plan, into a duet.
Oh, wow.
And I just love that and hope that people will hear more of us together in the future. The bluegrass singer Theo McMillan of the duo Theo and Brenna contributed both vocals and piano to the penultimate song, Wings Not Made to Fly. And his contributions just made that song utterly epic. And it really changed and morphed the song in a lot of really cool ways that I'm really thankful for. Two musicians were on probably my favorite song on the album, Hello Zunico. That's a really special one for me. If I get a chance to make a music video for this album, it's going to be that song. Nice. So Daniel Thatcher, an up-and-coming musician, played keys on that song. And then Brendan Dorman, a really great musician and producer, who played trumpets on a song on Unfall, came back to add trumpets to Hello Zunico. He also has trumpets on the song Shock My Ears. And his work is just so cool and really adds beautiful layers to the album. My brother was supposed to have guest vocals on the song Interrogate the Fantasy, which he co-wrote. But unfortunately, he got sick and wasn't able to come to the studio while we were recording. And then I think that's everyone, but I would be remiss not to mention Sean Power, the producer of the album, who not only did amazing work engineering and mixing and even mastering the album. He didn't master the original version, but I let him do the new one, and he really killed it. But also when I returned to do the new version of the album, I encouraged him to contribute more creatively wise for mixing ideas, programming ideas, adding little like extra sounds and effects and things. And so his mind and voice can be heard on the album as well. So
cool.
Yeah.
I definitely thought it was very well produced. I mean, I love the lyrics. If we had more time, we could talk about them, but maybe I'll talk to you personally about them later. But yeah, I mean, musically, I loved it. I would describe it as like indie alternative rock with a bit of emo thrown in, and then
spot on.
Even some metal-y spots here and there, couple breakdowns or screams, but that's not overall the album. But I know for me, it definitely took me back to like early 2000s music, all in kind of that vein. So I mean, I even have a playlist on Spotify that's called A Lethal Dose of Nostalgia. So if anyone wants to look that up, you can look up stuff that I used to listen to. But a couple bands off of that, it kind of made me think of were like, I mean, it took me a while to think of an artist to compare you to. Like, I knew there were artists that you kind of reminded me of stylistically, but not like, oh, you sound exactly like them, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like, who would I most compare him to? And I think Falling Up was a band that came to mind.
Oh, definitely.
You know, vocally and musically, I think a little bit. I'm taking up your time now, probably, but
no, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
No, Falling Up's amazing. Falling Up's a big one for me.
Yeah.
May is a very big one.
Yeah.
Thrice is very big, and you can kind of see a little bit when I go into those heavier moments. Their influence shines through a bit more.
Well, and then I was curious, like, you mentioned May earlier. Some other bands that I wrote down were like Mainstay. I don't know if you ever listened to them.
You know, actually, I just listened to them a few days ago. I think that was me listening to the first time. They
interesting.
Radar with someone shared a song with me a few days ago. So.
Yeah, they're kind of obscure a little bit, or like the Fold, like the old Fold, not like before the Lego Ninjago, whatever is going on with them on Spotify now. But
right,
you know,
and that would be another band that was like in the arena of what I listened to, but never like bought a CD or anything.
Okay.
There were a lot of bands like that, like The Fold, Nevertheless,
or like maybe Anne Berlin or House of
Heroes. I was
Heroes.
gonna say Anne Berlin, yeah. Like those were song like bands that like I knew them, but like I wasn't like a very big fan. But yeah, that's definitely like that era and style of music is so grilled into me.
Yeah.
That like it's gonna come out no matter whatever genre I try to do. There's gonna be some of that there. So.
Yeah, well, that was something I liked because, like, obviously, like the alternative genre is still alive and well, I think, but I hadn't maybe heard that particular spin on it in a while, and it's also like new and unique in its own way, I think. So
I appreciate that.
Great job.
Yeah, definitely just not trying to copy anyone, but
yeah,
you know, occasionally can't help but where my influences pretty clearly, honestly.
Yeah. So. Anyway, thank you for coming on the podcast. I think it was a pretty good conversation, and I definitely enjoyed getting to learn a little bit more about you and your music.
No, thank you. This was a blast. I wish we could go longer.
Yeah.
I could have this conversation all night, all day. So
cool.
But really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Appreciate your time.
And then I think I'll close out the podcast then with one of my favorite songs on the album that also is going to be your big single, I guess, and that's I Don't, which I think I will refer to as the alt rock Sermon on the Mount. So, so there you go, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to episode number 8 of the DeVaney Music Podcast. And thank you to Chase Tremaine for taking the time to interview. Make sure to check out his new album titled Development and Compromise on Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Music. You can also find him on Facebook and Twitter. Just be warned that if you follow him on Twitter, most of his tweets may be somehow related to The Last Jedi. The intro track for this podcast was created by Barry Blair, the original guitarist of Audio Adrenaline. Barry also has some fantastic music up on Spotify, so make sure to check that out. This podcast is edited by the magnanimous Chris Cooner. If you liked the podcast, make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This podcast is available on Spotify, YouTube, Anchor, Apple Music, Podchaser, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Casts, Podbean, Podcast Guru, and Radio Public. You may also subscribe via RSS at our Anchor site, anchor.fm/devmusicpod. Whether you loved or hated today's podcast, we would love to hear your feedback. If you have any thoughts, comments, or questions about today's episode or a previous episode, then please send us a message via social media or email at devaneyproductions@gmail.com. That's DEVANEY productions@gmail.com. We are also open to suggestions about which artists to cover. Thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned for our next episode with Good Morning Bedlam. We will close this episode with the song I Don't off of Chase Tremaine's latest album, Development and Compromise.
I don't cuss, but I make profane noises. I don't drink, but I make wasted choices. I don't smoke, but I get high incorrectly. And when I pray, I reach God indirectly. I don't run red lights, but I speed up on the yellow. You might rarely see me acting very angry, but you'll never see me acting mellow. You can tell me all your secrets, I don't share them, but I'll judge you